Well, a story now about the political turmoil in Venezuela and how it is impacting at least one person here in Corpus Christi. 6 American executives with Citgo refinery are in jail tonight behind bars accused of fraud and embezzlement by the Venezuelan government. That includes a refinery employee here in Corpus Christi. And as you can imagine, their families and other Venezuelans living in the U.S. are feeling particularly helpless right now. Our Marissa Cummings spoke with one Venezuelan woman today who lives right here. Marissa?
Maria Quevedo moved from Venezuela to the States 5 years ago. She says nowadays she spends her time staring at the news or calling family members in Venezuela to make sure they're okay. And if she's not doing that, she's protesting in Corpus Christi. Quevedo says something has to change in Venezuela soon because it's not just a political crisis happening, but a humanitarian one. The corruption has created immense inflation, and the people can no longer afford to buy food.
The inflation rate is more than 1,700,000%. That's ridiculous.
She says the average monthly salary is $3.
You can buy probably 1 or 2 eggs with that.
And as a result of that, Quevedo says crime has increased because people need more money to survive. She says although she sends money and supplies to her family in Venezuela, she still worries.
When my mom doesn't call me, for example, at night, I get really nervous and I can't sleep. Where is my mom?
Quevedo hopes Nicolas Maduro steps down as president of Venezuela and democratic elections are held. May be one step closer to happening. The European Union announced today they are not recognizing Maduro as president. Mackenzie?
Okay, thank you, Marissa.